Welcome, Allan Bashah.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for coming in. I know this was kind of something that we've been planning for a while. Just wanted to talk to, a local leader that's been doing this for over 20 years in the Valley, and you're originally from Montreal?
Yeah, I mean, I was 7 years old when we came over here, so almost young enough to call myself, an Arizona native.
Right. No, yeah, makes sense. I guess I'm from Illinois, but I don't know if I ever say that I lived most of my life there. I didn't. So I actually lived most of my life here now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that it's all going in a different direction. So let's get your background. Like, where did you start your journey? Where'd you come from?
Yeah, when I was in college, actually when I was younger, I was studying architecture, like computer-aided drafting architecture, not in the sense of IT. Right. And I always had that knack for like engineering, understanding things, taking things apart. My dad was a mechanic, so I loved using tools. And, with architecture, your tool is, your square and your triangle and your pencil and your eraser. And I got into CAD, and I just really, as a youth, I really became very curious about what the capabilities were of computers. And then going into college, I transferred into CIS and started studying that. And just, it didn't really end up challenging me in the way I wanted to. And I kind of fell into UX. So back in 2000, I was working for a company called ACT, Contact Management. And I was in there just doing some QA work, and I discovered that the 1.0 new platform that we were building wasn't incorporating time zones into all their meetings, appointments, and activities. So I wrote it up, designed it, spec'd it out. This was waterfall days. Back in the day, I had the whole document. Went to the lead in engineering, and we architected it and put it together, and they moved me over into UX, and had two terrific mentors as a young IT professional, and haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. That was in Arizona?
That was all here.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Over at Gainey Ranch.
Yeah. When did you move here?
We moved here in 84.
84.
So my dad took a job out here and moved here reluctantly. I remember the car ride and everything.
Yeah, all the way from there. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Was it a cultural shift in some ways? Because you were able to.
For me, yes.
Yeah.
So our background, we're Iraqi Jews. My parents are from Baghdad, Iraq. They're refugees to Israel, and then eventually ended up in Montreal. And I always joke with them, like, why'd you come back to the desert? Like, you experienced it, you lived it in Baghdad and back to Arizona.
Yeah.
But growing up, I spoke French, Hebrew, and Arabic, and English was not a strong language for me. So when we moved here in 84, I had to learn English, and like all my primary languages flipped to English.
Yeah. And you speak it very well. I would never have known.
Yeah, most people.
I don't even hear an accent.
No, I never had the about or any Canadian accents.
Accent.
But Quebec's mostly French, and even the French in Quebec is different than like the French you'll hear in France.
Right. Yeah. My stepfather is, I think he's from Quebec, from the East Coast area, Montreal. Is that Quebec?
Yeah.
Yeah, but same thing. His first language is French, and he goes to France, and he starts speaking French, and they're like, "Yeah, you're not."
No,
yeah,
yeah.
I know you're not French. He speaks it perfectly, but it's just their accent.
The accent,
it's like a Southern accent to them or something.
Yeah, I mean, even with English, like you go to some parts of the U.S. and the enunciation of certain consonants is completely different than what you're used to here.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, even for me, moving from the East Coast to Arizona is a cultural shift. I mean, it's completely different.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine being from your background, going from Canada, all the way to Arizona. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. But it's a good learning, and I try and be mindful of those experiences and apply it moving forward in my professional career too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Being all of that, have you felt that has helped you in a lot of your maybe vision and maybe the way you look at certain things?
Oh yeah. Like number one, empathy, right? I've seen things from a different part of the lens, right? My parents being refugees, some of the challenges that they had to experience, fleeing Iraq. in the early 70s, just me with my challenges with language and communication and cultural. So it really helps from an empathy perspective. So when we're designing something and trying to understand the user's perspective, like it's an easier transition for me. And ironically, my sister, similar background, she's a doctor in psychology. So just working with people, having that empathy, and just trying to help people achieve their goals or grow.
No, that makes sense. So when you figured out that one problem, you were probably a lower level, not even a UX person, right?
No,
People
I
like
was in
you know
QA at
what
the
that-
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always felt like people, QA roles are great for UX people because they'll often see something differently than maybe a technical
Yeah.
QA person.
Yeah, totally. They're closer to the user, right? Because they're almost emulating the experience that they would have with their test cases and how they exercise the software.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, so after that, did you move up in that company or
Yeah, I spent 10 years in total with Sage, about 3-ish years with Act, and then I moved up to some of their mid-market and enterprise products. But like formatively, like I had 2 great mentors there with Sage. Tony Kuros was the first one. A lot of people in the Valley know him.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
been with GoDaddy for quite some time.
it's right up there?
Yeah.
He's
and
hearing
then,
us right now.
Hi, Tony. And then Dean Barker.
Yeah.
And most people in the Valley know him. He's been teaching at ASU, and he's had a pretty strong career with United Healthcare as well.
Yeah.
And those 2 gentlemen have been foundational in my career. And then after that, it's all the literature. I just soaked it all up. Alan Cooper, Jesse James Garrett, NNG.
Yeah. That's
yeah.
awesome. And how did you, like, we both were connected probably more by Russ Brannigan.
Yes.
From ASU. Do you know, it's somebody you've known a lot or?
Just indirectly.
Yeah, indirectly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like that's when I met all of you guys. I wasn't really in the group. I wasn't in the circle, it seemed.
But I think it was IXDA,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of the events we were doing for IXDA, and then some of the work that like Theo Mandel was doing here locally for Arizona Usability Professionals Association, which I was part of that group, for
and
quite
World
some time as well.
Usability Day,
Yep.
which I hope we get back to it next year. That's always a fun event, or this year actually.
This year. Yeah.
We should probably get into that. But it's funny because I do remember meeting you at a conference over at the Twin Palms, right in downtown Tempe. I believe you were there, or I hope you were there. It seems like an event you would have been.
I think I remember an event there
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, because I think afterwards we ended up at the Irish pub there.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is now closed, unfortunately.
Exactly.
But
everything's closed. Because that's where like I met Tony, or I saw Tony speak, and I saw probably D. Barker speak, and Russ was there, and that was the first time I've really met Russ, and then we started talking, and it's just a great community in Arizona, and it's so tight. Like you almost watch it because it's so tight. Like everybody's gonna know what you've been doing.
Majority of my early career, all of my jobs were through networking or 2 degrees of separation. So it was just a phenomenal community for me, like when I was a young UXer.
No, and that's great. And I love that you're involved in UX and AZ. I love that we're able to count on you to help give that perspective to people. I think that's what I've seen about you, being able to step in and give perspective to young people within the community that I'm trying to build. And all of y'all, like Tony, Russ, everybody's doing such a great job of like stepping in and creating that like intuitive or that informative group. So when did you start kind of getting into the product leadership and UX leadership? Like where in your career did you start kind of starting to get called upon? As far as like.
So in 2010, I moved back to Canada, Vancouver, and I was doing some work for some of the enterprise products for Sage, and it was mostly a focused research role, and I was doing a lot of innovation that was like ethnographic led research, more specifically contextual inquiry. So I started working with product a little bit more and understanding product, like with the the product pipeline
Yeah.
with getting new innovative features into the roadmap. And then I moved back here, and that's where it took off. I ended up taking on a hybrid role of a product owner, UX, Scrum Master, and we're building a 1.0 mobile device management security application. And ironically, it was with an organization that Tony was working at as vice president of UX. And from then on, like I've always had one foot in product, one foot in UX, research, interaction design, and trying to get my third foot hypothetically into technology to help kind of streamline communication and break down silos. Because I always say that like UX is kind of like the glue between all the different departments. We help talk the user's language, using natural language, and we help communicate requirements. We help, QA. I mean, so we really do help glue different departments together, and that kind of started my product journey.
That's awesome. Explain to me, for the people that will watch this, ethnography or...
Yeah, so that's, I say it's like getting your butt out of your seat and going to do research with your users. So in enterprise B2B software applications or products, most of your users are sitting in an office. And it's important to understand their environment, the things that they interact with, trying to accomplish their goals with the software. It helps drive like usability testing, benchmark testing, and things like that. So for example, if I was working on an accounting product and I was working with someone on accounts payable and they're just, looking at invoices, writing checks, you can understand like different patterns in their day, and then you can start realizing pain points that they're having, and that creates opportunities to make more user-friendly software to help accommodate those weird pain points that they may have. I had one interesting scenario where I was doing an ethnographic research with someone in the construction industry. They were designing a nuclear power plant, and this individual was responsible for electrical. So lots of stuff he was working on. So I'm sitting there behind him, and I'm just watching him doing what was called takeoff. It's looking at the blueprints, putting in like a building plan. It's almost like project management and estimating the work and the cost. And I could see an IM alert came up on his computer, and he just snoozed it. Then it came up again like 2 minutes later, and he snoozed it. And then his phone started vibrating, and he looked at it, and he muted it and put it down. And then it went off again. And then eventually his phone started ringing at his desk. So he picked it up. He's like, "I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting right now. I'll get back to you later in about an hour." And he hung up, and he kind of looks over his shoulder. He's like, "That was my wife, and she works here." So like interrupted workflow is a huge thing. And like, how can we accommodate that from a UX perspective? So
No, that's cool.
Ethnographic research is about getting out of your environment, getting into the user's environment, understand what other factors help or inhibit how they use your product.
Yeah. I do find there was a habit even back in the days to design something, right? Because the first ask for even developers, I need to design, I need to build something, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, yeah, that I need to do that. But like you said, if you don't do those other things, what are we designing for? Who are we designing for? What is it supposed to solve?
Yeah. It turns into a hypothesis. And in my opinion, like from a B2B perspective, if your company's risk averse, then they might be okay with like not doing ethnographic research, come up with a hypothesis,
Right.
publish it, put it out in the world and see and measure it. But if you're in a risk averse or a heavy compliance industry, that ethnographic research really becomes important for mitigating risk in your delivery.
Absolutely. Because we have other things that fight against that, right? Like lean UX kind of approaches, right? Proto personas, assumption-based, bias-based types of assumption, but then you test it, right?
Yep.
And people though sometimes don't do that, so, which gets them in trouble. But I can see like it's not an antidote; it's more of another approach, right? And not to say that ethnographic type of approaches is longer. It probably is a little longer, but and more informative. And like you said, it mitigates the risk.
Yes. If you're in an environment where you don't have a whole lot of like knowledge and where you want to go or what you want to do with your product, ethnographic is a good discovery type research activity done early on in the process. And you could build a years-long roadmap with some of the data that you pull out. If you can fit it in, I highly encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a good healthy mix of making an assumption up front real quick in case you have to run.
Yeah.
But then, know that if you got to do the due diligence and go out there and figure that out, or else
Absolutely.
or you're going to look silly in
Yeah.
some ways. You
Yeah.
know, now sometimes startups where you like, I already know what I want. My vision's here. I've already kind of done that in my head. I just want to roll with it. First to market's the most important thing to me right there, right? Not being informatively complete. You know, it's first to market, got to get it out there. It's the idea, it's about the widget, it's about the marketing, it's about this and that. You know, how do you mitigate that with UX type of approaches?
Yeah, data. So if they have a hypothesis and we don't have time to really do like discovery type research, take a base wireframe or take something small and visual and test it with the market that they're planning on releasing with. And then you'll have data to come back and to help, talk about what should be the right activities that we follow up with. Do we need to pivot or just iterate? So and that could be quick, right? You could do that in a guerrilla style. You could go to a coffee shop if you're a D2C type company, or if you're B2B, you can find some ways as well.
Yeah. See, that's the greatest thing about, where you're coming from. You've seen it all. You've done it all.
Yeah.
You've created that kind of a scenario. You've gone through the big scenarios and being able to, figure out that path of where we need to go. I think that's a lot of times where when we're in our situation, that we have what am I trying to say? An obligation to create a better path for our clients. Being able to say, hey, I know where you want to go, but there are these things that we're going to miss, right?
And this, I think that's like a good learning point for young UXers is most of the time we're taught to be empathetic for our end user, whoever that is, but you also need to put yourself in the stakeholder's shoes, the people funding the project. And if you can do those activities, you can have more impactful conversations about the things you may need from a UX design process or a research process, and then get that in, set those expectations early on in the project.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean that's an interesting, that's the key balance, right? Like you have users, they have their things to say to you. You do have the person that signs the checks that have to say something to you too.
Yeah.
And you have to balance the two things, right?
Yeah.
And somehow we have to balance them into a positive to one and the other. The users need to understand the perspective, how they're going to pay for this, how they're going to achieve this. The business is going to be like, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to achieve it?
Yeah.
But then also use the motivations from the users of saying, I will do better if I have this. There will be waste, eliminated if I was able to have a tool or a different process here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's good.
That's where the strategy comes in, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, is there any particular stories that you could, tell as far as like how you worked through that with maybe a user group or possibly a.
So we were working through. This was a recent company where we're trying to improve kind of our conversion for like booking hotels on our platform, and we didn't have a research team. It was me as the leader doing the research, in between times of working on other things and working with my team and mentoring and coaching. So I was wearing multiple hats as a leader and didn't have access to do the user research, but I had a good relationship with marketing performance team. So I was able to get in there, work with them, get the data analytics through GA4 and through some of our other analytic platforms and paint that picture and take that back to leadership and present it. Like, here's what's happened over the last 3 months and the last 6 months. Here's how like the change is happening, and here's my recommendations based on the data. And it afforded me some budget and some time to do the right UX activities to get that where we want it to go.
Yeah, that's cool. If you were ever going to, get on a new team, let's say, like, or maybe let's go with a new team and then maybe see what the difference are with like an established team,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, if you're going to get onto a new team, maybe this company isn't really as informed, but they know they need it, right? they came to you and asked you to come and help them, what would be like your first steps or your kind of strategy of doing that?
Yeah, first thing I'd like to do is to talk to as many people that kind of touch the UX department, like up the funnel or down the funnel. So it could be product, it could be marketing, it could be technology, it could be account management, sales, right? They're all feeding the UX pipeline, and then just talking to like product owners, engineering leaders, QA, and then the UX team itself. They've been in it. They kind of know what's been going on, what's working, what's not working, and just kind of look at it from both sides and just gather, just like a researcher, right? Gather that qualitative data and just see what patterns are emerging. And then that will kind of help shape my strategy or how I could pitch or approach.
Yeah. I mean, it's no different than anything else, right?
Yeah.
It's still the same process that you need to identify.
The only thing that's slightly different about those internal discoveries is you want to build a relationship, right? You're not dealing with an anonymous person, that you're gathering data. And you build those relationships, and I always think that like transparency is important to help build trust, and trust and comfort can help feed like a creative and a UX team, and help feed some of that pipeline of work in the software development process.
It's one of my main tenets of how you create value.
Yeah,
for sure. I haven't gone over it much, but having that relationship, developing that, being available to those conversations, having the skills to offer both relationship and the availability, because you could have all the skill in the world. You're not making it available to anyone. So is it really valuable for anyone?
No.
If you don't have anybody to even give it to, is it even valuable for anybody?
No.
So it's interesting because I do put a lot of weight on the relationship, and because I think even if you kind of fall short with some things, you're still my friend.
Yeah.
I still am able to have that conversation with
you. But if we're friends, I don't have a problem admitting that I fell short, and then I want that constructive feedback to do better.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's so much more easier. People, especially during the COVID thing, and it's like a lot of online conversations throughout most of these people's careers. They've never met the other person on the other side in real life.
Yeah.
And I find that it's super easy to just kind of write it off and have the conversation, forget about it immediately after you stop. And you don't really gain the trust of anybody. And it's so easy for them to kind of go, well, they're not here, so I guess I'll fire them, right? Or I'll just stop talking to them.
Yeah.
It's so easy. But that human connection, there's energy between people.
Yeah.
When you get into
humans need to connect. Even introverts, like on a topic that they might be super interested in that might not be work related, they still have extrovert tendencies, in my opinion. I love games when I was younger. Like I love playing D&D, and some of my friends were massive introverts, but we'd still get together and play D&D.
It almost transforms you into a different world. You're allowed to do this, like Halloween. I'm allowed to dress up and be not like I am, right? Not how I normally am.
Yeah.
And it's an excuse. I wish the excuse would happen more often, because I do feel like people get more done when they're sitting next to each other. Just like this conversation would be completely different if we did it over the Zoom.
Yeah.
Just you feed off of each other.
I agree. I think it's important, if you do, like as a UX leader, if you have a team that's distributed, and whether some people are fully remote or hybrid or whatever it is, find time to bring everyone together. Do a 1 week workshop, do some, self-learning, some teaching, find some time for some shenanigans just to grow as a team, right? And build that bond and that team, and it'll reap rewards moving
Absolutely.
forward. Yeah.
There's nothing more than getting together, even in a more casual setting, and just have a beer, have a drink, go play a game, go play pool, go bowling, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It just opens you up to different conversations.
And
I think that's one of the things that I think us as leaders, identifying the right people for your team in the right circumstances. Obviously, I think having a hybrid flexibility is great, right? Because then you can manage your life and your work. But we all have to recognize there is a time when I feel that we need to connect and the energy needs to be closer to each other for us to be more productive and
Yeah.
be more empathetical.
Yeah.
I mean,
I totally agree. And like in those scenarios where you bring everyone together, you can embrace the work hard, play hard, right?
yeah,
We're all together. Let's focus on this problem as a team, for the next X hours. And then we'll go have an experience, a team building experience, go have dinner together. Then we'll give everyone some personal time and
Yeah.
then repeat it the next day and just
it's
find a way.
super powerful. So where do you think we're going with this? Not with this conversation, but with user experience. I mean, there's going to be these. Well, there are these technologies that are coming out, and people are thinking. Well, maybe I think they're thinking. Sometimes I think this way. That they're kind of taking some of the humanity away. Maybe that's too drastic.
Yeah.
It's some parts of our humanity has been challenged with AI, right?
Yeah.
Where do we go with that?
Yeah, I personally like to use AI as another tool whenever I'm doing anything UX research related. Obviously, if our product is intended to offer goods and services to humans, research is going to stay there, but I'll use AI to help expedite the analysis of data. And I still check the work. I still double check
Absolutely.
everything. It's just like when a calculator came out, like everyone knew how to do math manually. And, I remember I have a specific story. I was taking a test and I learned how to do all my math calculations in calculus on my TI, whatever, 87,
Yeah,
I think it was,
Texas
or 92.
Instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this particular instructor said, no calculators.
Oh.
And like, we never learned how to do it manually. Like they always taught us how to
Yeah.
and so I fumbled through it, but like I didn't complete the test.
Yeah.
And it's just a learning curve. So technology isn't going to replace the humans. I mean, use it to augment what you're trying to do, make yourself more efficient, still double check your work. And I found that that's kind of been a good, I'm not going to say marriage yet, but it's been a good relationship so far.
Yeah, I agree. My daughter, I was kind of harping on her, right at the end of school that you have to kind of learn how to do this manually, right? Math specifically. She's like, we just use calculators, and they don't really care if you know it or not. I'm like, nah, I'm pretty sure they do. And if they don't, I'm gonna have a problem at this point. But yeah, it is funny how sooner or later that norm is gonna shift a little different, where the norm now is you just got to know how to type it into a computer.
I've always felt that like for creative positions and UX and like interaction design, critical thinking is important. And if you can kind of understand like the semantics behind what's happening with some of these technologies, it'll make you a stronger critical thinker, even though you're not doing the manual long process anymore.
Right.
So if you're leveraging AI to do affinity diagrams with all your qualitative data and you've never done it manually, like how does that make you a stronger critical thinker?
Right.
How are you going to understand that your output from AI is directionally correct? Did it do a good job or not?
Yeah.
So I still think there's relevancy in understanding like why we need to understand the core concept, but then use AI to help augment it and make you more efficient. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we go into a room, we get a bunch of people, and we're expected them to put all their thoughts and dreams out on a sticky note, put it up on the board and make them reorganize it and do things
color code it.
Yeah, and color code it. And when we could have possibly easily just put in some proto-personas in a ChatGPT and it just outputs the same stuff, or their version of it, maybe at a bigger scale. But I do still feel having the energy in the room, having it's more localized, right, versus countrywide, or worldwide.
Yeah.
It's localized to how we feel and how we think and where we're going to try to get to at that point. I think the creativity, if we listen to the worldwide view, it's always going to be bland. Like it's watered down and
slightly pessimistic too, I think.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah. And And yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a cynic too. I am the worst person to be optimistic about anything because
Yeah.
I'm always driving the black hat into the room. But the idea of it that we can all agree locally and feed off each other's energy around that and being able to make that decision together and still feel good about it.
Yeah. And that's like one of the important things in UX leadership when you're working with product, technology, marketing, sales is baseline the conversation, use data to help create that baseline for everyone. So at least you're all kind of directionally stepping north, right?
Yeah,
You have
absolutely.
the right
Yeah.
cardinal direction.
What advice would you give to some people that are maybe starting to study this, starting to discover it and going, "Hey, I want to do that."
Yeah.
What would be your advice to them? Younger
I
people.
I like personality, and like when I'm looking at, I work with ASU a lot, so I look at a lot of portfolios and help them out with that. I want some of their individuality to come out, right? Because tools change. Like growing up, like I'm sure we've used a dozen different design tools. Figma is leading the market right now, but there's other things that are starting to pull market share. But don't turn your portfolio into a Figma presentation. Like talk about you, talk about how you approach a problem, talk about your methodology, try and showcase your critical thinking. That's what I think is important right now, because ultimately I'm not hiring someone just to do Figma designs. I want someone to be
Absolutely.
part of the team, part of the culture.
Do you
Uh,
think that's lacking? I mean, I could see that's a lot to ask for a younger person.
it
Maybe a
is.
little older person that's maybe had a different industry under their belt going into that would have some of that possibly, but I think everybody's scared shitless when they're going in
I think they're
and
scared of the
learning.
job market.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, to me, I do the same thing. I'll sit in on some portfolio reviews, and I think my biggest hang up is just how you speak. You can't enunciate
How you
what you're
present.
trying.
Yeah.
You're not selling it
Yeah.
to me. It looks
Yeah.
beautiful, but you're not selling it. I can't just rely on the beauty of it.
I think there's a lot of like technical skills in UX or in Figma that can be taught if you don't have them.
Yeah.
But if you're the right personality fit and you have that critical thinking capability and you bring, positive energy, to the team, like that's what is more important. Because if you have a team of designers and there's one person that just kind of pushes everyone's buttons in a negative way or just changes the energy in the room, it could affect everyone's performance and
Yeah.
deliverables. So
And I like the tenacity of some people. Like
yes.
they're going after it because I don't know if it's a desperation or not in the market, or they're just hustling,
Yeah.
right? And you want to see
It's the
a
hustle.
good hustle
Yeah.
from somebody,
Yeah.
not just sitting back blaming everybody else for not giving them something to do.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
something I'm looking for that. I'm looking for somebody to tell me that they're going to do something for a purpose.
Yeah.
You know,
One of the biggest challenges that I had was one of my designers when they're getting to design review, they weren't scheduling it proactively, but reactively. So, okay, my design's about done. I'm going to tidy it up. It should be ready by the end of the day. So I'm going to schedule my design review tomorrow. Guess what? Not everyone's available tomorrow,
Right.
especially in the times that match up with your calendar. But at the beginning of the design sprint or, earlier on before you started working on the design, if you just had a rough idea, and you get this with experience, right? If you had a rough idea of like what it's going to take to get your design done, even if it's not 100%, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100% is my problem. I don't care if it's 100%,
Yeah.
right? Like there is, especially a true UI designer, just does not want to show you those things.
That's why like interaction design to me is so important. Start with low fidelity, get your sign off, and add the fidelity as you go.
Yeah.
If you lock yourself in a room and you put out a big beautiful design and you miss the very first like step in the journey,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I can even see the first step of that journey, describing it with words.
yeah,
We were talking about Disney earlier. He had it in words
yeah,
too. He used visual aids after that. That's a wireframe, right? But to be able to have a vision in your head and be able to articulate that with another person without a visual aid is super powerful.
Yeah.
And to get them excited about what you're thinking, right? Imagine storytelling, really, person that can really sit down and relate with a good metaphor or a story,
When you think of Disney, like what's the first thing that pops in your head?
Cost. No.
That's going to Disneyland.
That's going.
Yeah.
I think what pops in my head, I think, is a vision. There's a fantasy. I do feel like the intent, at least from Walt Disney, was this connection to anything. Anything's possible. The wholesomeness of true love and good and evil, and a lot of older movies were around that, right?
Yeah.
About that good will always overcome evil in some ways.
It's kind of like an optimistic escape in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's always a universe that wants to tear it apart, and there's the one that saves it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's saving personally, but it's the universe conflicting with us. It's the yin and yang of the universe,
Yeah.
And I think our interactions with maybe developers, it's the yin and yang sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Or business, the three parts, right? You got technical capability, you got your users' desirability, and you got your business's ability to pay, right? And they're all fighting amongst each other, and not fighting, but they're trying to negotiate the best path together. And I do feel, as UX leaders, we have to be mindful of those two other things. I think that's when you truly become a leader in this space, instead of being so hyper myopically focused on the user's problem.
Yeah.
You are an advocate for that part of the event. But remember, there's intersections.
And I think you need to be an advocate for the process of evangelizing that as it goes through the software development pipeline.
Yeah.
I think one thing that was always important from a leadership perspective to try and like co-design as much as possible. And I always felt that like if you get product and technology and QA involved in some of that design process and the early on work, they'll take more ownership of their part of the journey. And I think you'll end up with a higher quality product in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
so that's like, hey, help paint the teacups before you ride the teacups.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Or like, are they going to spin? How are they going to go? Like that's technology parts. And that was the greatest thing about Disney. He was able to bring in all this new technology that created a different experience and a one-time experience. That's one thing that was kind of neat. He didn't want to buy a Ferris wheel that looked like every other Ferris wheel ever. Now that's a heavy creative part, and I think there was a lot of tension between him and his brother, where the cost of that is a lot more money. But he was all about how people felt about going in. This, the way they even built the whole Disneyland, which is kind of interesting.
I mean, that's just really good checks and balances, right? Mm-hmm. Product, technology, UX,
Absolutely.
checks and balances. Because we're always advocating for the end user. Products trying to build that revenue, and technologies, trying to avoid scope creep.
Yeah, absolutely. and there's a risk. There's taking risks, as we know, will either result in failure or result in some pretty decent things, right? Some lot of benefit, but you have to be able to take that leap to be able to go there. I don't believe doing a UX process is taking a leap. It should be something that we at least have to navigate through,
It is. And I think part of the challenge is getting your stakeholders and your colleagues not in UX to understand the UX process so they can see the touch points where the collaboration is, because I still think people have a tendency to think it's just visual design because that's the tangible part.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't like it when they cut it. Obviously, nobody would. Yeah. Especially the user down the road.
Yep.
You'll pay for it.
Yeah.
You'll pay for it exponentially somewhere else.
Yep.
If you don't pay for it now, it might be even cheaper now than if you throw something out there to the world and they'll never trust you ever again.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it'll be very hard to get them back to trusting.
Yeah.
That's even, how are you going to do that?
Yeah. That loyalty is so important. Yeah. Don't waste it.
Yep. Yeah, especially if you're trying to do first to market.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
It's going to be painful.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day. When I was younger and I was in tech, and I was like, I loved Microsoft and got my Microsoft certifications and things like that. And I had a Windows CE phone and, and all those
God.
fun gadgets. Yeah. And then when the iPhone
You're
came
the
out,
one guy.
the one guy, I'm like, and when the iPhone came out, I was like kind of skeptical at first. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is like better than what Palm was doing and what BlackBerry was doing. And it's like a nice design and sleek. And I wasn't a huge Apple fanboy at the time, but I recognized them as having a good product. And iPhone 2 came out and I was like, okay, I need to try this out. I need to get in. I haven't looked back since. And it's just understanding that design process, understanding like the quality over quantity, or just getting something to market too fast and rushing it and alienating your users or losing that trust and that loyalty. It's so important. And like, being as a UX leader, you got to advocate for that as much as possible and use data to support your argument or your debate.
Yeah, I think I was a iPhone 1 user, and I loved that price tag. Now thinking back, $400 or whatever it was for. It was like, now I'm thinking like, man, I can't get out of one of these phones with $1,500.
Well, they recognized how big their market was and they adjusted, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, it was revolutionary. I was never one that had a BlackBerry. I always had flip phones and this small tiny phone, like in Zoolander's, like hello, and it's something that would fit in my pocket because I couldn't stand that. And then I was thinking like, man, this thing's so big. Like I'm like, let's stick this in my pocket somewhere.
Yeah. So you have to get
then
an
the
accessory
Max
bag.
came out. I was like testing with other people's. I'm like, how does it fit? And they're like, oh, it's not too bad. I'm like, I can't even sit down. So I wasn't a huge fan of the Max, or the big ones. Now I think I have one, but they're now they push the glass out so far that it's actually.
How revolutionary were the virtual keyboards versus the physical ones, right?
Well, again, I didn't have those other things. Like I had no experience with the BlackBerry bubble keyboards.
Did you have the Sidekick where it twisted out?
Never had one of those.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do. Or the ones that you flip. The phone's almost like on a hinge where you flip
clamshell.
Open. I never had those. I didn't text a lot, that's for sure, with the regular 9-key, but so I was kind of like, I was an interesting user, a person that had no history of anything, right? I could have said, well, man, I can't even type on this thing on a screen.
Yeah.
But somehow people do it fast. There's nothing to see.
They get it done.
Yeah.
My dad being a mechanic, his whole life, he's got sausage fingers.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to see him try and use,
oh my gosh,
things with haptics and just touch screens.
They've done that. They've done some significant research on that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you slide your finger off. They know, it's like, they kind of just know. What baffles my mind is the whole swipey.
Yeah, that's
thing.
great.
I'm
with the
like,
pause.
how does that work? Like, how does it know what I could be spelling like 5 different words at this point, but the context of what the other words around it, and it's like brilliant.
That could have been almost like early AI right there, right?
In some ways,
predictive text.
It's kind of crazy, like how scarily
good
and
accurate.
I don't use it that often because I'm just not.
It's early usage of machine learning, right?
Yeah, but I've never been one to like be first to things, except for the iPhone. And I had an iPad or an iPod, like 4th gen.
Yeah.
I didn't go with the full screen one. I think that came after.
I had the Nano.
The Nano?
Yeah.
I think I might have had the one that had like, you can convert to a watch.
Oh, and it was like a little clip.
Yeah, it was practically like this size.
Yeah.
And they probably just redesigned this, right? But I had like a band that you could put it in.
Oh.
And so you could run with it.
It was always there, yeah.
And it was and it had a clock, It was actually basically the first
That could have been
Watch.
early research.
Hell yeah.
Right?
Hey, let's put this band out there.
It's
See
an
if people
interesting
put
like
it
the
in.
progression from the the iPod into its different flavors and form factors, and just the technology behind, you know, miniaturizing all the components, and then how they've been doing that with the iPhone
Oh my
now,
gosh.
and then now with the latest iPad release, and
Yeah.
the thinnest one ever.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating.
Oh, how they cram all that
I
stuff.
wonder
in
if
there.
that incremental improvement follows the Fibonacci.
It may.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see if you're doing universal math,
Yeah.
something has to follow something
Yeah.
like that. So it'd be
interesting.
interesting. I don't know. It gets down to where it can't be packaged anymore. Like it's now in your head, right? Neuralink.
Yeah.
It's
Neuralink.
like now it's nothing,
Implanted.
right? Now it allows you to do that even more.
Yeah.
Right. Like even further and further and further. It just changes the math.
We'll have a slot pretty soon to do like memory upgrades.
Put a little SD card
I
in
need
your
a
head.
2 terabyte in there.
Man, I need an upgrade. I'm so stupid right now. What are you like? What are you, 2 gig?
Yeah.
Is that 2 gig memory you got
I was
there?
so last year.
Sorry, I don't go out with people less than 10 gig memory, 16
Yeah.
gig memory.
You're a late adopter. As we digress.
We just went out with this guy with 8 gig memory. Oh my God, it was so boring.
You couldn't keep up with the jokes.
I just put a new joke back in. She didn't laugh once.
I feel like that's happening with like cooking techniques now. Like there's all these interesting people are exploring all these different ways to cook, and like cooking to me is very similar to like UX design, right? Like do your research, understand. You have a little bit of a methodology. If you're depending on what your application is, you might do some early testing. Like,
Sure.
Does this
Put in
smell
a
good?
small
Does this
thing.
taste
Yeah,
good?
Exactly.
You know.
I mean, if you were in your crap, man, that was something I really wanted to do. Before I went in the Navy, I was like really contemplating going to the Baltimore Culinary School.
Yeah.
I was like I don't know. I didn't have any cooking background.
Yeah.
Oh. That went off.
Matt's camera died.
dare
Peace
they.
out.
I think we can close this out, right? Just focused on you, not me. What are your future goals right now?
My future goals are, to help lift the UX community. I always like helping students at ASU, doing portfolio reviews. I probably need to beef up my online presence. Most of my stuff I do is face-to-face, coffee shop down the road. Let's meet and talk UX, talk about your portfolio, getting your foot in the door in UX. I want to help grow a product by evangelizing for users. So, wear that UX hat.
Yeah.
And I want to build more teams, and teach people to collaborate and to enjoy work. If you have a terrific team together and you're solving complex problems, it doesn't feel like work.
All right.
And you're having fun with your colleagues, and then you get that added reward of delivering something meaningful, delightful, something fun. And for me, it hasn't mattered if it's been B2B, B2B2C, D2C. An end user is still an end user. They have emotions, they have feelings, and I want to help improve their lives and do it with a cool and fun team. And
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. How will people connect to you right now? Like
Today,
where would you want them to?
Yeah,
want your
LinkedIn
personal
is
email out there?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm active. I look at all my messages. I developed that practice early on, right?
Yeah.
So even if you email me, abash@gmail.com, it's abash@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, same thing.
Yeah.
Those are the best ways to kind of reach out to me. You
Yeah.
can hit me up on X. I'm not super active, but I still
I
read.
browse.
Yeah, I read mostly. I'll browse. Yeah.
I'm a voyeur.
Yeah, my Instagram and Facebook are private, so I keep that to family.
No, that
only.
makes sense.
Yeah,
I would. Yeah, I wish I could do that. And you're active in the UX and AZ community, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Which I love.
yeah.
Yes.
And I'm also trying to reboot IXDA Phoenix.
Yeah,
It
right.
had a
Tell us about
lull.
that.
There's some organizational changes happening at the parent IXDA organization that's national, that's global, sorry. So still trying to figure out the footprint, but I was really trying to focus on IXDA Phoenix to be geared more towards established UX people. I want to talk more about leadership and strategy, similar to what we talked about here in this podcast, because I think you've been doing a phenomenal job with UX and
Thank
AZ and helping with a lot of the the young and upcoming UX people, and the people are still junior, but we have a good mix, and
Yeah, absolutely.
they're a terrific meetup. So if you haven't been to a UX and AZ, come check it out. It's a fun opportunity.
Yeah, we love it. It's been going on for now 10 years.
Yeah,
10
it's
years.
unbelievable. It's like gone by
2012.
fast.
Yeah, it's nuts. And this year is kind of challenging because we're all so busy. But it's like, that's why I kind of want to augment some of it with these podcasts, so it allows people to get content and listen to people without having to inundate their life to go there. Now I still want to do the meetups because again, human energy together is
it's phenomenal.
where it goes. So, but if I can, push a couple things out there so people can listen to it, kind of gets them through the day, before they can go
mental
out.
break before you dive into complex design.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's been awesome. I'm so glad that we were able to put this together, and and thanks for everything you do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you and appreciate this and the community here in AZ. We're strong and we're getting stronger, and this is home. So let's build a nice home, all of us collectively.
I love it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks.
Well, I'll sign off now, since you can't see me. Here.
Have a good one, everyone. Peace out.